Dr. Margin's Guide to New Monsters, The Prophetess. The Prophetess. Nothing is promised to us. Not even the future. This, however, hasn't stopped people from trying to promise it. And not just a future, but the future. Fortune tellers, psychics, and astrologers all existed before a system of measuring time was even fully in place. Because if one can tell what time will bring, do they need to understand it at all? Precognition is a tricky subject within my field. There are some who believe that an individual can predict the future, and do so accurately, simply because they have an innate ability or talent. Others claim the ability does not exist at all. Still others say that it is necessary to have some sort of guide to have this ability, a non-human conduit to gain the skill. I usually consider myself part of this third party. And my recent travels to India did nothing but affirm this belief. 1 round-trip ticket. A taxi for 1. A room at an inn for 1. And I was there. There was Mandava, in the Jhunjhunu district of India, a town that enjoys a bit of respite from the overpopulation of the surrounding cities. The people are traditional, probably more so than anything else. The center of the town has claim to its market, and each day merchants and tea brewers and shoppers populate its streets, only to pack up each night and make their way there the next morning. But I was not interested in any of their wares or services. I was interested in one woman. They called her the prophetess. She sits on a mat in the corner of the market, and yet she is the most popular vendor there. Men and women travel far and wide to hear her predictions. Some walk away with nothing but their money back. Their aura was off, she was unable to read them, come again later. But the others walk away with predictions that claim total accuracy. I met with the prophetess late, her last customer. She sat, cross-legged, and looked up at me. Her head was shaved completely, save for a single thick braid that extended from her scalp and hung by her face. Her eyes searched me quizzically. I did not look like her regular customer, but she was professional nonetheless. Sit, sir, sit. Hear what will come to pass. Hear knowledge before knowledge arrives. It was her classic pitch. You could hear the rehearsal in her voice. I sat down, and she examined me closer. American, she asked, going off script. I nodded. It was no difficult distinction to make. And you wish to know the future? Actually, I responded. I was more interested in your past. She tugged at her braid at this request. My past? Why? What is done is inconsequential to what would be. She was right back on script again. I am a researcher. From America. I would like to hear how you got to where you are. I am willing to pay double, even, for the trouble of it all. I held out the money, and needed to explain no more. The almighty dollar is a better convincer than I ever was. She reached out and took it. Satisfied, she placed it in her shawl and began to speak again. I am glad to take your money, sir, but I'm afraid there's not much to tell. Begin with you family life, if you would. Are you married? The prophetess touched her head, not her braid this time, but the skin surrounding it. I was, she said. But no longer. What happened? He died. She did not want to speak of it any longer, but I needed more than that. How did he die? He fell ill. We were married for years, many years. We had 2 sons together. And are they still living? Yes, she said, surprised. Yes, of course. And then, not without a bit of pride in her voice, they live with me. I provide for them. But your husband? Yes. One day, he leaves for business. Says he needs to go a couple of towns over, will be back in a few days. But when he does return, he was sick, very sick. He hardly seemed the same man. His hair was in tassels, his beard was in clumped braids. And he had a wild fever. hallucinations. I tried to take care of him, but it got difficult. He would become violent, threaten me and the children. He was paranoid, mad. One morning, I am making his bed, and I found a knife under his pillow. It was then I knew the children were in danger. And what did you do? I moved my children out. They stayed with their grandmother. I looked after him, tough. I tried to nurse him back to health. But it did nothing. He passed, and I caught the sickness soon after. But you survived. Hardly. The disease ravaged me, but it was the men afterwards that almost killed me. What men? Of the town. They claimed I had taken my husband's children from him, that I had let him die. They took me to the street and beat me, shaved my head. I am a disgraced woman. She toyed with the remaining braid. They shaved it all but this. She tugged on it again. Why did they leave it? They could not cut it. Nothing could tear it, regardless of what they used. They changed from violent to frightened. They left me to die on the street. She looked up at me and smiled. But, again, I survived. And was that when you started to prophesy? Yes. It started oddly enough. I would hear predictions in my head, whispered, and monotone, about those I passed on the street. It went on until I couldn't stand it anymore. I began to tell people as I passed them, people I've never even met before. And when they started coming true, of course, more started to come. I began to charge them, to provide for my family, and that brings us to where we are. And are you able to tell all people? She shook her head, tugging on her braid again. No, she said. Sometimes I hear it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes, a customer goes and comes back, and I'm suddenly able. What about your children? Have you ever tried it with them? Oh, yes, plenty of times. But there was never a prediction. Not yet, anyway. There was a pause. I hear it for you. Would you like to know? The future is tempting, but I knew better. No, I said instantly. No, thank you. I think I've got enough for tonight, thank you. She nodded at me as I stood, telling her I would try and visit her again the next night. Later that night, there was an uproar. When I moved out of my room to see what was the matter, I saw that the men of the town had dragged her out of her home and tied her to a pole in the middle of the square. I moved out as quickly as I could, trying to ascertain what was happening, what she was being punished for. After some time of trying to converse with some very angry men in broken English, I finally got the story. The prophetess had smothered both her children in their sleep. I was able to get to her, somehow, through the crowd. Her eyes shined with hope when she saw me, and she grasped me by the hands tight. Please. Help me. You need to help me. They're going to kill me. She held my hands to her face and pleaded with me. They're saying you killed them. They're saying you smothered your children. She didn't respond, but continued to weep in my hands. I pulled them back slowly, and looked at her. Did you do it? I asked quietly. She got silent, looked up at me, and nodded. I went into their rooms tonight, after they had fallen asleep. There they were, my two perfect angels, sleeping peacefully in their beds. And then, I heard it. Heard what? I asked. Their futures. What they were going to do, how they would be, what they would suffer in their lives, and I had to. I did them a favor. A mercy, sir. A mercy. But you killed them. Don't you see that? Your own children, you killed them. She pursed her lips together, stopped crying, and looked down at the floor instead. What is done is inconsequential to what would be, she whispered. It was the last thing she said. They took her, the mob, and placed her on a pyre, screaming that she was a devil, and burning her alive. Tradition, after all. I stood by the pyre until it was over, until the flames died down, until there was nothing but ashes and a charred skeleton. A skeleton with a braid attached. There was a hissing sound, and the braid wiggled, once, twice. Then it got erect, dist angled itself. Spindly legs grew silently from it, sides lifting it from the ground. Its hundreds of legs moved, skittering forward, back, and then forward again towards me. The prophetess, then, was not the woman herself, but the creature before me. The creature is symbiotic, it has a mutually beneficial relationship with its host. Or, rather, with those who survive its bonding process. It lives by attaching itself to a host, but gives them its own ability, a foretelling of the future. The prophetess moved its head up at me, a million tiny teeth in a spiral lining its throat. A voice spoke then, in my head. It was as if my own thoughts had been hijacked, and a foreign was directing them to form words that didn't originate with me. It was like the passing thoughts as one falls asleep, but more directed to form one sentence into another. Michael Margin. I can tell you things. Things only you would know. It took a couple of its spindly steps toward me. The woman, Michael Margin. You must be wary of her. I pride myself on being a researcher. I do nothing but investigate these creatures, take notes of them, and leave them as they are. I am no monster hunter. But here, staring into the gaping mouth of this monster, this creature that had just manipulated a woman into killing her own children, and was now trying to manipulate me, I knew I couldn't now. The creature may have been able to foresee the future, a power nothing should have. But it did not foresee me lifting myself and crushing it under my foot. It hissed like it was deflating, and then, there was nothing but silence. Perhaps it was just the quiet of town that was long from waking, but to me, it was the golden silence of an unknown future. I left soon thereafter, to see what new and terrible things I could find. The monster knew it was destined to have your soul. Fortunately, its knowledge of English didn't extend to homophones. This is one of the best comments I've ever read on Reddit. You, sir, are a god and a hero. I am a fan as well, but I would consider anyone a god, just saying. Ain't nobody fucks with Michael Margin. Ain't nobody. Damn right. Even if you're skeptical, it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep that warning in the back of your head. Because more than likely, you'll probably be able to tell what woman the prophetess meant as soon as you meet her. After all, better safe than sorry. Also, I really hope there's more of those out there, at least for the purpose of the species not going extinct. It manipulated her to kill her own children. Not sure we should pity it? Or maybe it really did tell her the truth about the future. The creature had a symbiotic relationship with whoever it attaches to. So, there is no immediate reason for it to lie to the mother. Nothing is set in stone that way. It doesn't really matter if the future can be changed or not if she believed that it could not and based her decisions on that belief. The creature may not have meant for her to smother her children, she just couldn't bear the possibility of the future she saw for them coming to pass. According to whom? This story. If the future was immutable, she would not have been able to kill them. Unless it was meant to be. Then the future of the kids growing up is a lie. Or false in the sense that it was not a real future. I feel like manipulate is too strong of a word. If the accuracy of her predictions is taken into account, it seems like it could legitimately see into the future. And it told her that her sons would do terrible things, become terrible people. While yeah, it was extremely wrong of her to kill her own children, and thus defy fate, to an extent, the creature itself didn't actually make her do it. It just gave a heads up, hey, this is what your kids will become. It didn't say, hey, your kids will be horrible so you should murder them. He indeed should have heeded this warning. The mind leech from his first post appeared to him as his wife, whom he has said many times is non-existent, and has now brought him to Germany to be devoured. But it did not foresee me lifting myself and crushing it under my foot. Best line in this series so far. I love your work, Dr. Margin. I love this series. Keep up the good work, Doctor. Humanity needs you. Forewarned is forearms, as the saying goes. We don't want too many forearms though. Best entry so far, Dr. Margin. It is great to see some more of your personality. You did a good deed killing that thing. I look forward to your future travels. I see now why you didn't have internet connection last week. That's one badass move from you. I wonder if there are more creatures like that one, and if there are more, how would they react to this? Good to see you back, Dr. Margin. Another awesome entry. My favorite series on nosleep. I have been checking Reddit every day since your last post. I was worried something might have happened to you, Dr. Margin. Tut tut. I would have expected a dissection of the prophetess. It would seem that her anatomy varies based on her bonded v unbonded state. She was uncuttable while attached to her host but squashable when not. Fascinating. Dr. Margin, I absolutely love your research and hope you the best of luck in the future. Now, for my question, have you ever heard of the SCP Foundation? It seems that you guys the same goals in mind. I have, at least rumors of their existence anyway. I disagree with their opinion that these creatures need to be contained though. Research and precaution is understandable, but imprisonment? Containment? That's where we diverge in our opinions. Dr. Why did you become a monster researcher? Was there some type of childhood encounter, or was it just a passion that grew? Another thing, how do you get the cases? Does someone call and report it or something? I'm happy to hear about any and all creatures I can kill with my boot. We all predict the future all the time. This is what intelligence is. The more information we have about the present, the more accurately we can predict the future. Con artists, confidence artists, not only predict the future, they create the future. They create situations where what they say comes to pass. They gain the confidence of their marks through these predictions. Then, when the mark trusts them, they provide a prediction knowing the marks will act on it. The mark's action is usually profitable to the con artist. This monster was a con artist. The hairs probably act as some sort of sensory antenna that give it extra knowledge so that it can make predictions. Then it tricks its host/mark into killing so that it can feed. But who knows what it feeds on? You did the right thing by ignoring its lies and stepping on it. Personally, I think the right thing would have been taking it to a lab to be studied and dissected. You do realize that is the plot of every monster run amok movie, right? Real life equals movies. There would probably be proper procedures. Plus, you know, it being dead doesn't mean it still can't be studied and dissected. It was the heat of the moment and he was confused. These are defiantly my favorite of all r/nosleep. Been checking your profile every day, lol. Haven't started reading yet, just wanted to say keep it up, beaming face with smiling eyes. This would make an amazing book series. Would make a pretty awesome TV show as well. It reminds me of a supernatural/grim cross with something else added that makes it unique. Red Heart. I was hesitant to read this one. Your last post left me paranoid for a week. Anyway, I'm at loss for words. Good job. Your series is fantastic. I check every day for another update. Thank you for sharing your wonderful tales with us. The only way to be able to change your future is to be unaware of it. The more you know of it, the less likely you are to change it. A golden opportunity to ensure riches or ruin. A good thing you never heard yours. You decide your own destiny. I know you've said before you're working on research grants. How did you get the credentials? I'd like to get into this field, but the few schools I've seen that recognize cryptozoology as a legitimate field painfully underfunded. As someone who shares your empirical zeal and sense of adventure, you've hit the jackpot for producing mostly anecdotes. I went to a fairly popular American university. Technically, my degree was in anthropology, but the school is known in my field as one that offers alternative education on the side. To actually be recognized by them is a bit of a catch-22 though. You need to have made progress in the field, but in order to have the real tools to do it, you need the education. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment Reddit Story Time for more Reddit stories.